Hello, I'm ToiletVodka, and welcome to the last grounded beginner's guide that you should ever need, I hope. In this guide, we're going to cover surviving your first day, quests and objectives, where to place your base, and the first items that you should build, among a few other tips and tricks. And it should be a pretty comprehensive guide on how you can get started in your grounded playthrough, regardless of what difficulty you play on. Hope you enjoy it. And if you do enjoy it, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel, and also watching all the way through to maximize your grounded gameplay potential, and also to help the YouTube algorithm show this video to other people. There are a lot of ways that you can start a grounded playthrough, and I'm going to give you my guide on how I like to get started, and probably the easiest way to get started and bootstrap yourself into the intermediate, mid, and eventually later stages of the game. Grounded is a lot of fun. I've had a ton of enjoyable experiences in the game. I played it with friends, I played it solo, and I just can't get enough of the game. So what I like to do when I start playing is, generally I grab everything that I can find. I look around, I grab sprigs, I grab pebblets, I grab plant fibers, I grab sap. And these are going to be really important later on in the game, but we'll get to that in a minute. Grabbing consumables like mushrooms is also really important. You need to understand hunger and thirst management. Eating the mushrooms is a good way to sustain your early game hunger, and you'll find them all over the place. Mushrooms are generally found pretty much everywhere, so if you are having trouble finding food, mushrooms are definitely the way to go. And in the early game, finding water is going to be a little bit of a struggle, or water management, should I say. The blades of grass that you can find in the early morning or in the evening hours generally have, or a lot of them will have, water droplets on them. You can either punch the blades of grass if you can't find a surface to stand on so that you can slurp it directly. You can punch it, the water droplet will fall, or you can swing with whatever weapon you happen to have equipped, and then once the water droplet falls, you can go and slurp it up and your water bar will fill. It doesn't take too much water, but you do burn through it kind of fast, definitely a bit faster than your food. The grounded tutorial actually makes things very easy for the early game, and realistically, if you follow it, you shouldn't have any issues. I'm just here to provide a few tips on how to get started a little bit faster and make things a bit easier for you. So when you follow the quest marker, it'll lead you to this research station here, and when you get there, that's where you're going to find the analysis machine, or the research machine, and you'll be able to start getting your first crafting recipes. Using the resource analyzer for the first time can be a bit daunting, but the first things that you should research, as long as you have all of the items and you manage to pick them up right at the beginning, are pebblets, plant fiber, and sap. This is so that you can make it through the early game without having to do much backtracking. But you'll see what I mean in just a minute. The resource analyzer regenerates charges after you've used all three at a rate of about 1 charge per minute of game time. So if you happen to use your charges on something that you didn't mean to, or you just make a mistake, that's fine. They will recharge relatively quickly. I wouldn't worry about it too much. I'd also like to note that everything that you can possibly analyze, you should definitely do so, including items that you've recently crafted, or any items that you may have picked up, since they're not consumed and it generates brain power so that you can get to the next stage of unlocks. It's really worth it to analyze everything that you can find. It's also a really good idea to just take a look around the research station and see if there are any other items that you can find. You can find files, tape recordings, and consumable items even like granola bars that are going to be pretty useful. The tape recordings and the files are really good for written and vocal lore. The tape recordings will be read aloud once you pick them up, and they kind of help explain how you ended up in this scenario in the first place. Definitely worth a listen. Your next step should absolutely be to craft a pebblet hammer, craft the pebblet axe, which I have in my hands here, and to craft a torch so that you can activate the mysterious machine. Once the mysterious machine is activated, it'll lead you into the oak lab, which is the final portion of this video. So once you're done chopping down a few extra items and you have that research completed, then you can move on, hit the activate button, and start the next portion of the quest. At which point you'll realize, if you take a look around, that there is a blade of grass that's blocking one of the electric poles or whatever it is. So you take your newly crafted pebblet axe and you just chop that hoe down. And once the blade of grass is chopped down, then the first unblockage will have taken place, and then all you have to do is worry about the next one. Once you've gathered all your resources and you go back to the resource analyzer, perform your analysis, the last one should take you to brain power level 1. Once you have brain power level 1, you'll be ready to craft your pebblet hammer, which you're definitely going to need to make it to the next portion. Once your pebblet hammer is crafted and you've got your torch, then you're ready to get rolling. There are other levels of the brain power unlocks, and you will reach these with due time, but this is why I say that it's really important to research everything that you find, because in case you don't unlock these organically by researching specific items, then you'll unlock them just by using the resource analyzer enough. Even if you don't unlock a new recipe, it's always important to use the resource analyzer. Everything that you find, I mean it. At this point, you should have gathered everything and made a pebblet axe, a pebblet hammer, a torch, and possibly a pebblet spear so that you can fight the bad bugs in order to free the second laser beam and unlock the oak tree. If you haven't found any up to this point, this is where you're actually going to battle your first hostile bugs, which are lawn mites. They're relatively easy to handle, but even on normal mode, they can give you a run for your money if you're not careful. This is also where you should probably learn how to block. And the game will do a pretty good job of teaching you how to do this. It's pretty straightforward. You will take some damage still, so creating bandages is also useful. Bandages are one of your first crafting recipes that you learn and are very useful. Having sap and plant fibers handy to create bandages is a must. Once you've dispatched with your first set of mites, you'll come up with a couple more when you enter the cave for the first time, and this is where that torch that I mentioned earlier finally comes in handy. Also, the pebblet hammer is going to come in handy here as well. So you have to bash these lawn mites, and you can use other weapons to do this as well. I just recommend using the pebblet hammer because it offers a chance to stun, and it's very useful for bigger enemies down the road. Once you've freed the laser beam of its pests, you can then continue exploring the cave, at which point you'll find some of these slime mold stalks, which actually make for cheaper torches if you decide that you don't want to use as many resources for the regular torches. I don't personally like them very much, but everybody has their own preference. And then you're going to want to bust up all of the quartzite you can find. Quartzite is used throughout the entire game, and you need tons of it. So every quartzite rock that you can find, you're going to be carrying back boatloads of quartzite rocks for the rest of your time in Grounded, pretty much. As many of them as you can find. Just bust them, just crack open all those rocks, and take them with you. As much inventory space as you can spare. There is also a SCA.B at the end of this cave, which allows you to change the look and feel of your user interface. This one's called Mite Rider. You'll find them in several other places throughout the map. They're neat. They're a lot of fun to equip. So if you do locate one, then definitely pick it up and see if it works for you. Once you're ready, exit the cave, head back to the mysterious machine, and activate it so that we can move on to the Oak Lab. I won't spoil the cutscene for you. But once you're done with the cutscene and you've realized exactly where the Oak Lab is, now might be a good time to grab some other resources that you need before we move on to base building. Base building should definitely be your next step. You're going to want a place to camp out for the night, and I have just the place. It's one of my favorite locations on the map. Having some clover armor is also going to be very useful. We're going to get to that in just a moment as well. But there are some sights to see along the way. You'll identify your first punch, which is basically a juice that you can pick up. You can slurp the same that you would do any water, so it helps with water management, but also gives you a little bit of food as well. So if you have some hunger issues, you can drink a little bit of the juice. There are 3 of them located around the map, and when you discover them all, they actually give you an extra perk. So they're definitely good to find. Make sure that you discover them, and it will help you out in the long run. Eventually, the juice can also be used for other things as well. So very important milestones and landmarks to find. They're really good to have. My next step after that is to continue heading toward the oak tree, at which point you'll probably realize that you've spent most of your first day just getting ready for this moment. So once you end up with the notification that it's getting a little bit later in the day, you're going to want to start looking into a shelter, and this is one of my favorite places in the game to create one. I will warn you that if it's your first time playing the game, that this area is very dangerous, both in the daytime and at night, and you have to be constantly aware of your surroundings. But this location is great for a few reasons. One, you have this sap clump here, which you can use to have lots of sap. It's really nice. You can break it down with your hammer, and then you have a boatload of sap that you can use for constructing. Also, the tree drops a lot of sap as well, and you can walk around and end up picking up the sap that you find there. Also, there's an abundance of acorns, which are useful for armor and building different building materials and different construction recipes. So acorns are also very useful for the mid to late game, especially. I also really like this location because it's a launch pad for the mid to late game and a lot of other aspects, but has a lot of the early game materials and resources that you need, and has the added bonus of being right on top of a field station. So you can do your research right next to where you plant your base. The flower garden fence post is probably my favorite place for the early game base that I could imagine pretty much in the entire game. People may have some debates about this, but this is my absolute favorite. I almost never put my base anywhere else. Some people think that you should hole up in the starting area, and I very much disagree. But what makes this area most dangerous is the fact that there are orb weaver spiders, and there are wolf spiders, which are some of the more dangerous bugs in the game, that roam the area at night. While this isn't a huge issue during the daytime, at nighttime, if you happen to be roaming around, you might come across a wolf spider and get the pants scared off of you, because they are very scary and you can't hear them, and they sneak up on you basically out of nowhere. It's terrifying. From your crafting menu, you'll be able to place the objects that you've seen me place here. The three most important ones that you're going to want to get set up are your roasting spit, a storage basket, and your lean-to. The lean-to provides a handy respawn point once you use it and set your respawn point, and also will let you sleep at night. It is also important not to sleep too early, because if you sleep too early, then you'll wake up in the dark and you will have to do some of your exploring at night, or if you're afraid of spiders, then you'll just end up having to wait and do whatever miscellaneous stuff you can before you set out adventuring for the day. But if you're having issues with water or food management, or water or hunger management at this point, you may find yourself in a bit of a tough place and be forced to go out and explore. So be very careful when you go to sleep. When discussing crafting, it's also important to bring up the crafting table or crafting station. That is essentially your bread and butter when it comes to crafting. You can craft simple stuff through your inventory, but pretty much everything else is going to be done by a crafting station, and it is one of the first recipes that you'll use that requires grass planks, other than general construction or constructing a base. So all it takes is 3 grass planks. You'll put the crafting station together, and then you'll have access to a lot more recipes, and definitely build some armor as soon as possible. I recommend the clover armor. This is because clover armor gives you a little bit of protection, but also gives you a little bit of hunger and thirst management in addition to that protection. So you get a few perks and buffs out of the clover armor, and it's very easy to craft. So for early game, easy armor, clover armor is definitely my recommendation. Once you're done with your nighttime sleep routine, you've slept it off, and you're ready to go for the day, a good thing that you're going to want to take care of very early is your food and water. So eat a little bit, save some snacks the night before, so that as soon as you wake up, you're ready to take charge of the day, seize the day, and then all you have to do is walk over. Another reason why I like this base is there's a fair amount of grass close by where you can slurp some dew early in the morning, and it's really nice. And once you get your water and health station and food station set up at your base, that won't be a problem anymore. But in the interim, for the first day, definitely very useful to have. And then another reason why this base has a sort of a prime location is because of its close proximity to other early game stuff. The old anthill is a somewhat challenging conquest point, and will give you a lot of stuff to do, while also allowing you to harvest some ant parts and allow you to craft new armors and weapons, which are very useful in the mid to late game, shall we say. And there are also a couple of goodies in there that you will want to discover on your own. And then the last bit of why I really like this base location for the early game is because of its proximity to the oak lab. You can get there without ever really having to touch the ground. If there are any creepy crawlies or dangerous enemies down there, you can very easily avoid them and make it. So where you used to spend your raw science and get your daily quests was with Burgle, but with one of the more recent updates, that's actually changed to this terminal in the Oak Lab. So you can use your raw science, your hard-earned raw science, to buy some specific upgrades that aren't really available elsewhere, most of which are specific buffs to your character. You can get increased health and some other things of that nature, and also some base components and things. So when you want to build better bases or a second layer to your base, you can buy those here. Buying the smithing station makes the most sense at this time because smithing stations are pretty useful for crafting and upgrades. So that's why I recommend going for the smithing station first, and then as you save more raw science, you buy whatever you want. That's really entirely up to you. Completing the daily quest is highly recommended because you get a fair amount of raw science and it encourages you to explore the yard, though some quests may be a bit more difficult to reach than others. If you're crafty, you should be able to make it just fine. And that about covers it for this video. If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking it, subscribing to the channel, and hitting the notification bell so that you can get more grounded content in the future, as well as other gaming content on the channel. Also, feel free to sound off in the comments below and let me know what you thought of this video. This is the first one I've ever made of its kind, so if there are things that you think I could improve on or that I should change about the video, I'm more than happy to take that into consideration, and I would thank you for your time. I appreciate it. See you next time.